On computer. Okay, now go.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, so this is Christopher Totten, who many of you know from his architectural approach to game design book, which you've used in class, or if you haven't yet, you will soon. He's going to be taking a look at what remains of me and giving us his first impressions. Go ahead, Chris. Let's take everybody, including myself, down a notch.
Well, first of all, I'm very glad to be here and excited to check out this game after hearing so much about it from Chris in our various adventures at GDC. Um, so I'll just jump right into it. One thing that does strike me a little bit here in the title screen, and I think this is something you want to be careful of, with, especially with pixel art, is we have a few different resolutions going on here. And now I say that as somebody who like totally got some feedback on this um a little while back with like marketing that was done for a game of mine. Uh I did not produce that marketing, and it's something that bothered me, and I had to tell the person very kindly, like, I didn't make this and I am not their art director, so I'm just going to let it go. But um for your art direction in game, you want to make sure that if you're going to do pixel art, you want it to be consistent, because I can
Yeah.
see like the robot's head. The robot is very low resolution.
Mhm.
And I don't say that as a bad thing. Like
Yeah, yeah.
it's very big chunky pixels, and I like that. Except it's got little pixels in the shadow, and that's not as convincing. And
Yeah.
then there's much smaller
For
pixels
the
elsewhere.
record, this was made a year and a half ago by two classes previous,
Okay.
as a last minute thing for a internal school showcase, and we've just never returned to it. So I think
Yeah.
the current art directors are intensely aware of those kind of problems and have spent most of the semester addressing them in the game.
Well,
So if
and
you see them in the game, tell us, but we've definitely been
I
considering
think it warrants like mentioning, simply because I have this with my students too. They'll do this as well, and I have to remind them, like, hey, part of pixel art is making sure it's like cohesive.
it.
The
Hmm.
other thing I was going to say on the title screen, and again, this is something that I see my own students do. You've got a game that primarily is played with a controller, but I have to use mouse to access the menu options,
Hmm.
and
Yep.
you want basically like whatever your controller is, you want it to be all controlled by that thing.
Hmm. Yep.
And again, like, this is a my students do this, and I always say like, hey, what's up with that? And they're like, oh, I didn't even think about that. So
Hmm.
um anyway, I'm gonna hit
So
start.
for actually starting the game, if you do make it through to the boss fight is technically playable, but is definitely not. No one thinks that it's done. It does not have the affordances to tell you what you should do, and I would be very surprised if you were able to beat it. So if you want to stop after looking at that scene, don't feel like you should try to beat it.
Okay. um so for whatever reason, the game is not picking up my D-pad, but I do see that it's picking up my WASD, so that works. Okay, press A and D to move, press spacebar to jump.
For the students' information, Chris is using a third-party Nintendo, Super Nintendo clone controller. So people may use all different kind of controllers. We've only tested with two. It will eventually need to test with a lot more different input devices.
It is odd because this one works pretty well with most things, so I'm kind of
Mhm.
surprised. Like I was like, oh wow.
It may be because the movement controls are mapped to the joystick, not to the D-pad. The D-pad is
Oh, that's
used
why.
for a different function later on. So,
Interesting. One of the things that I would say is, um, now this kind of gets into like different preferences of yours as designers, but like, um, you're doing the text thing here. I've also seen some like, if you have embedded environment tile that like has the image on it, that can be nice, because then you don't have to like, look at a game like Braid for an example of this, but like then you don't have to localize, press space to jump. You can just like have the graphic be there.
hmm
So it's nice to think.
like a diagram kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I really
Yeah.
love this background. I think it's great. space to jump farther. Yeah, this is beautiful. I think this looks really good. I really like your checkpoint system here. Like, am I okay? Yeah.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I
It's
love the
wonderful that
checkpoint.
you understood what that was before dying. That's good.
The walk cycle needs a little work. It's kind
Mm,
of like they're moving kind of funky.
yeah, I think also that animation is hasn't been worked on in a year, so that's one of the original ones. And getting the feedback that this is your main character, you should probably work on that some is good.
Right. Yes. What would a modern indie game be without a grapple mechanic?
Yeah,
Ah.
the idea behind it is that you're a robot that has an extension cord, and all of your interaction with the game world is through your extension cord.
No, I think this is great. I think it's really cool. I'm just joking because it's funny. Like I had a like I my game right now has a grapple character, and then
Mhm,
some of my students made a grapple game, and then um a I think this is technically under NDA-ish, but
mm.
like a person you and I both know, um when I was chatting with them about um games they were working on, because they were like reviewing one of my students' games. Um, they mentioned they were also working on a grapple mechanic game, and I thought that was really funny. Okay, so so one thing I would do here, like, so you're
Yeah.
seeing I'm having a lot of trouble
No,
getting to.
I see the problem, and I've given the feedback many times that I know it's easy for you, but
Yeah,
making the tutorial level more challenging is not a good idea because no one else has played it 5,000 times, and it's so hard once you get good at something to recognize how hard you've made it.
yeah.
Um,
Like
so
if
yeah.
this were a whole character length lower, I think
Hmm.
it would be good. But right now it's creating like
Real blocker, yeah.
a real blockage. Hey, I did it. And it's the kind of thing where like some no if you were at like I'm gonna be at GDEX and we're gonna have with Nemo, I'm gonna be at GDEX and I'm
Hmm.
gonna be at I'm not gonna be at too many games, but people on our team are gonna be at too many games
Yep.
showing it. Um and like if you're at a thing like that, somebody will just quit.
Yeah,
They'll be like, this game
75%
is
of your players wouldn't get past that point in the game.
right. Like there's a lot of games in their Steam libraries, and why, well, like
Hmm.
what makes yours special that they're gonna,
Oh, now you're going to get bumped back before it.
am I? Oh, you're right. I am. Oh no. Yeah, see, so
Another design choice here. Don't put a hard challenge on, uh, save point after hard challenges.
right. And one of the things you want to do is like,
You'll have better luck with the grapple if you jump when you fire it so that you have a shorter length between you and the grapple or you and the plug.
oh,
And you can, if you grapple and then jump, it'll shorten as well. But yeah.
yeah, see. So one of the things you want to do, especially when you're doing um showing off like a mechanic for the first time like this,
Hmm.
and I know like they've had a grapple already, but this is like grapple swing, like
Yep.
really more intricate
Yep.
grapple swing. Um,
Yep.
so you should treat it like it's the first time you've seen this.
Yeah,
But
I mean, just getting rid of the pit after it and lowering it by one tile would probably be enough.
well, I'd say get rid of the pit before it too. Like get rid of this pit under me right
Ah,
now.
so you're not swinging over a pit at all, just grappling over a obstacle. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so like really practice that Kisho Kentetsu idea where it's like you want to introduce an idea kind of in isolation so that the player can get used to it.
Mhm.
And you want to then you want to like give them the harder version. So like you should make that first one like absolutely safe.
Mhm.
Okay.
Enter, I think, is the advance your dialogue. This dialogue should have been given to you at the very beginning of the level by a different version of the hologram who disappeared by regression. And this one should be saying, yeah, it's good you made it through the level, but not there now. Everyone knows and knows they need to change. A mechanic is required here that we have not told you how to use. That mechanic is use the E and Q buttons to add and drain energy for the plug you're plugged into. So connect to the plug and then press E and Q to drain or charge it, and that will, yep.
Oh,
And C
okay.
lowers your health and opens the door.
Oh, I like that. That's like a nice risk reward. Ooh, that's beautiful. So like beyond some of like the level design quibbles, like it's actually very nice level design. Like I think it's engaging, it's interesting. Um the parallaxes,
The
which
bubble parallax got messed up a little bit, I think. At what used to be a little bit more stable. I think they've got it on the wrong layers, maybe.
yeah,
Another issue with regression where it was all looking very good, and then it wasn't, and no one noticed or filed bugs when it stopped working properly. So
it's funny, like we had this weird glitch where like this morning the programmer was like, "Hey, this important character in this cutscene is just gone." And that was what I was reading on Discord when I was trying to get the game up and running. I was like, "Oh, please don't break right now."
Yeah, with the controller, the grapple lets go when you let go of the controller, and the now you can drain from here to charge up if you weren't full, um, and it preserves your energy level between levels, but you die. But when you die, it refills when you come out of the thing. So
I mean, yeah, that's part of the other problem I'm having is that I'm on a on a controller. Um,
right.
yeah, I mean, I would say like you haven't you're doing a really good job tutorializing this mechanic here, but like where was this tutorial
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in?
It shouldn't have. They want to replace the door with like a pressure plate at the end so that it opens for you automatically.
Yeah.
And we have a internal dialogue system that UI isn't fully implemented. The idea is that you'd like step on the pressure plate and it would say something like "Energy system interface disabled for training purposes."
Yeah.
Door opening or whatever. And then you're
Um,
like, "What do you mean?" And then it would tutorialize it in the next level. So
I
you
mean, I
wouldn't
don't even
need to
think you
use
need
it
to
in
go
the
into
first
that much
level.
lore. I think it's just like that's the goal for this one, and then the next one you start implementing it. One of the things, if you're not going to have like a secret passage, don't signal
Right.
like there is
A
one.
lot of the design is actually intended for you to come back to the level and there to be stuff there. So we haven't added that, but there would be a way you
Okay.
could go that you can't go right now. Most of the Metroidvania stuff that is planned isn't movement based, but is like interaction based. Like at the end of beating the boss, you get his voice command module, which lets you like open doors that were voice controlled and engage in dialogue where you have actual responses. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, there's the intent for that, and those like looks like there should be something here. The intent is that there would be something there. So
Ah, because yeah, one of the things on somebody who like both makes Metroidvanias and cut his teeth on a lot of Metroid, like as a gamer, like
Hmm.
really loves Zelda and Metroid and all those. Like I will look in every nook and cranny. You show me a nook or a cranny, I will look there.
Hmm.
And it's occasionally kind of maddening because, yeah.
Hmm.
We were actually
Yeah,
discussing
it's.
this, speaking of like patterns and pattern
Hmm.
recognition. We were discussing this like in our game dev meetings where um I was saying it is odd to me, we'll put like clear Metroidvania things, like Metroidvania patterny things in our levels and
Hmm.
think like, okay, a player is going to see that and think I'll come back later. Um,
Right.
and they don't. Like they get
Hmm.
really like
Yeah,
those
focused on going forward.
focused
Um,
on going forward, even though that's like the game clearly trying to communicate that this is not forward right now.
mhm.
So it was really interesting to see that happen. Um,
This NPC is not really implemented. You can get the dialogue with them to work, and when you get if you connect to them, you'll see that they have a lot of virus, and they will react to that. But they're not really a part of the level. They're an artifact at this point. Just ignore them.
like, but I want to poke them.
If you do get the dialogue to work, he says, "I'm infected." If you were to feed enough clean energy into him that he wasn't primarily infected, he would have a different dialogue response. And that's a gameplay mechanic for that will be used eventually. Um,
You've got these little like lips on
mhm.
all your platforms. You want to be careful with that.
Yeah, the collision for them is supposed to shunt you out if you jump with them, but they do still cause some problems. I like them visually, but probably we should just let the player clip through them.
Yeah. Ah,
Almost. The background for this one is also in progress. This is a very, very old version of the background. It should have actual windows with parallax to the real outside, but it's not
I
there
don't really
yet.
mind. Oh, I see what you're saying though.
This is still just placeholder, not placeholder dialogue, but just pulling from the first dialogue file rather than the actual dialogue for the levels.
Yeah.
The game is pretty lore heavy, but just most of that hasn't been put into the game yet. A lot of the reward is uncovering the mystery of what's going on in the game world, but that part I think is not evident yet. This may be really hard if you're not comfortable with the platforming or the interface is awkward. There's a lot of it flows beautifully if you are comfortable with it, and you can almost not have to touch the ground. But yeah, same thing
What
with this one. I'm interested if any of this reads to you because there's something that's not at all being explained here, and I'm curious as to whether it will ever be something that makes sense to you. So, what do you
gave me
make
your
of
purple
that?
energy? Am I having an energy battle?
So you are being infected with virus. Those are virus lasers, and they are corrupting your energy. That would again be explained NPC interactions and signs and stuff that don't exist yet. Uh,
Okay, so
the
don't give
mechanic
me your
is
purple energy.
right. The mechanic is that if you ever reach 100% virus level, that's also a fail state. And you can see that in the thing that you're charging.
But I'm charging traps too.
Yes. Well, you're charging, you're putting virus into the things. And if we finish in time, I can show you really quick a level where they've, a demo level where they've actually incorporated malfunctioning into the machines. Oh, that's interesting. It didn't activate.
Yeah.
Are you slightly low? Okay, well, if you can't get back that past that, then we're stuck. I don't know if it's because that had too much virus and they put a max on operating it, or you could try dying. You should respawn without virus, and then you could come back and try giving it less virus. I know you didn't. Interesting. They have that constant. Yeah, you may be stuck. That's
We
possible. You may have found a fail state. Since you're on the actual build, there's not a whole lot we can do about it, unfortunately.
aha.
Nope, there it goes.
Oh, but it went.
Yeah, and then you. All right, Izzy. Chris found a new version of the misbehaving platforms bug. Uh, we used to have a bug that was triggered by frame rate, where it could pass its like the behavioral limiter, and the value that was being looked at, and then um, that would cause it to keep going in one direction because it was breaking the pathing code.
I think that's what
It's a
happened
weird
here
bug.
too.
Yeah, I think so, but I'm not sure why it didn't start in the first place. That's new. Uh, yeah, so I think you would basically not be able to get back there without completely restarting the game because we don't have a save and load system implemented yet. Um, I can show you the boss fight room really quick so you can see what that looks like, and then give any final thoughts. Let's see. Let me make this a more reasonable size. And I think problem with a 5K monitor is that it doesn't work so well over Zoom. Let's see. Share screen.
Better lighting.
Share that screen. Share. There you go. And then play. All right. So boss scene. Come on. There you go.
Again, gorgeous. Looks really nice. Ah, cool.
So boss scene, you now have to deal with the lasers, and the way that the mechanics of the scene works, you have to get virus, but not too much virus. And you can get virus by getting hit by the lasers, by draining from the lasers, and you can get energy by draining from the energy. And then you have to platform up and feed your virus into the AI, eventually maxing him out, and then that destroys him. In the final version of the game, you're then able to claim a upgrade, which is his voice, which suddenly shuts off. He should be giving you dialogue, taunting the whole time you're fighting him. And then once you do that, the lights come up and he is screaming silently on the other side of the screen because you've stolen his voice. You can use the voice to open the door or go back and use it to access new logs and new spaces in the previous level. To explore the plot. And that's what they've got so far for chapter 1. Chapter 2, you ascend up out of the undersea lab into the world and progress the plot. But those are the basic mechanics. The
That's really
virus system, yeah, and the grappling are sort of the differentiators right now. the virus is incorporated into sort of all aspects of the gameplay except for making you not work, um, because that wouldn't be fun. But it makes machines not work. It makes enemies, if you drain them of most of their life and then charge them with clean energy, they reducing their virus level, they become NPCs. So essentially, all the NPCs in the game have dialogue and personality that you can choose to interact with them if you want to take the time to heal them, or drain them of virus and restore them. You can also power them down, or you can, if you in a chapter 3 you learn that you can overcharge things and put more energy into it than it normally holds. That energy burns off, and it burns off virus first, so you can use that to sort of purify virus out of things. But we
Oh,
don't introduce that mechanic for a while, um, which makes it easier to get rid of virus. The idea is that some areas in the game would be sort of zero sum energy management puzzles, but then other places you would have outlets that had an infinite energy capacity that you could draw from, shifting the focus to to the platforming and different kinds of puzzles.
cool. I love this. This is great. And it's like really neat looking. It's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel about the camera change for the boss fight into
I think it looks good. Like that's appropriate to be
cool.
able to see the camera change. I mean, we do a lot of those too.
Right.
Um, and I think like it's a really nice dramatic look. Um, there's like a giant screen with a laughing red skull is like super appealing. I think
There,
it's
see, I got too much virus and got reset.
yeah. And I like, you're doing a really smart thing with like the lighting with, the purple plug and stuff like that. Um, I think like the only thing you want to make sure, and you can do this through like something lore dump or like lore time,
Hmm.
is, just make it clear that he is not associated with the virus.
Right.
Because like my initial thought is like, that's the virus himself,
Ah, I see. Yes. Um,
whereas, and like you're color coding it different. You just kind of need to like, you know, just say, give a hint or something like that, where it's like,
mhm.
oh, here's, maybe in the lore, make it like the virus is this kind of uh chaotic actor, like chaotic
Yeah.
third actor.
The lore of the game, which the point of the game is figuring out what happened, and it's supposed to be very unclear and mysterious in the beginning, but with a lot of things suggesting that there might be meaning behind it, in terms of the dialogue and the visual narrative. But the lore of the game is that around now-ish, humans started inventing AI. This was all totally came up with pre the launch of ChatGPT,
Right.
but that around now people start making real progress with AI. It's awesome. Everybody's super excited about it. Some people are terrified, and it's being used to power these robots that are helping out society. But the scared people decide that the only way they're going to get everybody else to come around is if the robots go crazy and start killing people. And so they engineer a virus, infect the robots with the virus using wireless power sources, which is why you have a plug. And that causes a fraction of the robots to go crazy, starts a robot human war, wipes out civilization. Thousands of years later, remnants of humanity have built this lab to create Atlas robots to try to reclaim the world. As far as most humans know, robots went crazy one day and tried to destroy humanity. As far as most robots know, humanity created intelligence and then tried to wipe it out. In reality, most of both sides didn't have anything to do with this, but so you're going back and forth with the lore of what your character understands. The playthrough of each level, you're getting the human side of the level in the lore that's accessible going through the first time. After you get the boss's voice access and you go back through the lab, you're going to be getting the robot's point of view of what happened for a bit of the story, and then that cycle of swinging back and forth in terms of what you understand and where your sympathies lie. It's like the core narrative beat cycle of the game.
Okay.
but none of that is present right now. I mean, other than like sort of the environmental cues for it, but
Well, but I think, yeah, like if you find a way to write in like little, because I mean, this is something that I've been working with a lot on like kudzu, is writing in opportunities to say, it doesn't have to be like revealing the world to them, but something where it's like, if you just kind of disassociate the like bad AI versus the virus versus
right.
you, and kind of set up who the teams are, you could
Hmm.
get this idea that there's this bad AI, and and like, or like maybe it's set up through the cutscene, or how the cutscene at the beginning of the boss fight, once you have one, begins, where like maybe the
Hmm.
character is like laughing, and then the virus turrets
Right.
like appear, and he's like, oh no, what are you doing here, or something, like it doesn't have to be, oh no, what are you doing here,
Right.
something like, oh,
Yeah.
we've got some pests.
Sure. I mean, the idea is that he's using the virus, but is not himself infected, and is sort of like using it against you. Um,
Okay,
but
I see.
um,
Well, but even then you
yeah,
can have him be like,
yeah,
I've brought some friends or something, like something to
sure, sure,
kind
sure.
of
You
say
did
like,
this to us. Now we're going to use it to destroy you.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Something like that, right?
yeah. And like if you
Yeah,
do that sort of thing, um, you know, I think that'll set it up as in like he doesn't want the virus, because that's I
right.
think the ultimate.
It's unclear at this point, and that is the team is also pretty aware that the motivations and like plot of the boss fight are not being revealed right now. They really just got the fight actually functional like
Yeah.
yesterday.
Well, and I'm
So
I'm really, so I've had a really interesting back and forth with myself on this, and I've even mentioned this to some students as a way of kind of like figuring out how to approach this, to kind of get their input on it, which was, so before, like, a student will pitch a project and they'll be like, oh, and we're gonna have a boss fight, and I'm like, I bet you
right,
are. um
sure,
not in those exact words or that exact intonation, but in my head, as somebody who's made a lot of boss fights. And to be clear,
all
those are like one of my favorite things to make, because they are these like really cordoned off, like unique bits of gameplay that are super exciting and super visual and super fun to make, because it's also like a giant monster.
right.
um but it's like you're making a lot of bespoke code that's not going to be reused anywhere else. It's just
Right.
work. It's just labor. And so I think that like whenever students pitch me one, I tell them, I'm like, look, I'm not going to treat this as like part of your scope that you must hit. I'm going to treat a boss fight as like, holy cow, you did it. You managed to do
Yeah.
it, right?
Really, really quick, one of our core ideas is that the boss fight mechanics we introduce, we both want to introduce them before you hit the boss, and then have them be things that show up in the rest of the game. So if you had gotten to the previous level, there's you run into lasers in the final level, and you start seeing what happens in terms of getting infected energy.
Yeah.
Um, so like those exist. And then really quickly, let's see, mechanics and virus effects tutorial.
What I was going to say though is that like this is also kind of like adding some data to my thoughts on boss fights. Like I said, I always tell my students, don't worry about it, but I'm coming around, and
Hmm.
especially again, like after Kudzu, and making just like a series of like lots and lots of boss fights. And I'm kind of coming
Right.
around where I'm starting to think like, I wonder if actually I've been wrong, and it's actually a good thing to require a boss fight. Um,
Mm.
as a means of being like, one, this is how hard this thing you may take for granted. Here's
Yeah.
how to think about like these really interesting design problems, because there is this like sort of multi-layer of like, it's got to be cool, it's got to be
Right.
mechanically sound, all the mechanics need to have been introduced in such a way that you understand what's going on. And then you've got to make sure that like it fits into story, but maybe
There we go.
story is like how you hint at the thing working.
There. So here you can see like
Hold
it's
on.
now twitchy and bleeding purple particles now that it's
Oh,
been
nice.
activated. And the more virus there was, there's a threshold that it'll start like really jumping around and like it might knock you off.
Oh wow.
So if you activate the platform with dirty energy, like you lose traction and it'll jump out from under you. So you really have to be on top of it to use it in that state.
Oh wow.
So there's some subtlety to what we're doing, longer term. We just don't have that implemented everywhere.
Well, and I mean, and real quick to finish with the boss fight thing, I swear I'm gonna
Yeah.
get to a point. Um, what is interesting to me about that is that you've had them do a boss fight like this and you're having them run into these issues, and there are these things you're struggling with, and you're having to go back and look at like how they get implemented and what it means to feed virus into stuff. And I really like commend that. I think that like that's really cool because that is showing like, oh, this is something that is actually pretty neat and sound, it seems. And I appreciate that with what you're building.
Yeah. The scope and vision for the game, is in a way huge because students have come up with it over 2 years, but also the core design, and sort of when you start seeing design elements and you're like, oh, these two elements interact and like have all of these repercussions that are beneficial. Like they've hit that point with the design where the early choice to have the wire and to have a dialogue system and to have how you interact with the NPCs and having the virus work the way it does, like spins out into all these possible narrative and puzzle complications in a way that I'm like, I don't know that I could have come up with a design that fires on this many levels on my own in a reasonable amount of time. I feel like the iteration that students have done and the 100% turnover in the studio each semester means that a lot of bad ideas, and boy, have there been some bad ideas, have gotten weeded out of the game because no one's attached to them next semester.
Right.
But the good ideas, they're like, oh no, that was cool. And those get built on in a way that a stable team of developers has a really hard time doing and seeing. So it's interesting.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Like, are you prepping a talk about it for like GDC at all, or?
Yeah, I was talking to Ian Schreiber about it last GDC, and he was like, "So you're giving a talk on this next time, right? Um, on how 100% turnover and like
I love
that
how Ian
works."
is this arbiter of like talks
Yes,
people should give. And
yes,
it's totally him being like, here's a talk I want to see by a person.
sure, sure. Well, no, and then like I had that conversation with him and talking about the game, and he's like, "That blew my mind in like these two different ways, and you need to give a talk on it, at next GDC. And the title of your talk is going to be Every Student Everywhere All at Once." Um, and I was like, "Oh, okay, I guess that's what I'm doing."
Right.
Um, but I think it is interesting, and has continued to be true that each semester the game improves in ways that I don't normally see games improve um, in industry development in terms of the design getting better and better. Um,
It's really good. Like I'm thinking like you need to start putting it into festivals, not like, I mean,
yeah, no, we're getting there, right? I think when chapter one is polished and we have it out on Steam Early Access, like I would consider it for like IGF. It's not, and there's smaller festivals first probably, but like it's not yet at a point where it's going to win IGF. But I think when the first few chapters are done and you can see how all those systems interact, I think it is something pretty interesting.
well, and
The
that's what I meant by festivals is like, no, not an
Yeah,
IGF thing, but like definitely a game that I think should be at I don't know if you do like Indicate Horizons, like
Yeah, no, we did that this year. I mean,
Okay.
Celia Pierce, who works here, is one of the people who founded Indicate. So,
Yeah.
like, we do that.
She's
But yeah.
been bugging us to submit Nemo, and this is the first year where we thought like, okay, it's not like done by any stretch of the imagination, but it does feel like
It's
there's
enough to
enough
show off.
to,
Yeah.
yeah, to be there and to give an idea of like, okay, this is what the game is going to feel like.
Mhm.
Because our demo doesn't even have like the point where you start collecting characters yet. Like you can get them all. And
Right.
we spot you to kind of like get you used to the idea of switching characters, but
Hmm.
it's like, in terms of the gameplay, it ends right before you would actually in the real game acquire the first non-Nemo character.
Right.
But it still like shows like this action gameplay and the art and
Hmm.
this vibe.
Yeah. I
But,
think
but it
when
like
we,
we're hoping, we're kind of like looking at it and be like, oh, that's actually kind of like enough.
yeah,
Um,
and your art is so good, and the you know character design, the narrative pool you're drawing from are all so good that you know that's gonna everyone will love it, right? Just because it's stunning, and all of the strong gameplay bones that it has are what are going to sustain that kind of hype when people are
well,
actually
but
playing it.
to get to your game, like, and this is why I was trying to be, like point out things I saw that were really cool in the artwork is like it looks really nice. It's nicer than some professional games like I've curated for like Sam Arcade.
Hmm.
Um, it feels like, and it doesn't feel like a student project. I mean, the caveat of it is that it's made over multiple semesters with different groups of people kind of filtering in and out.
Right.
um
Yeah, we have over 200 at this point.
right, so there's a there is a thing to be said that is like, look what multiple semesters, or like look that it takes multiple semesters, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like I could take that to my students and be like, this is what it takes for a long period
right.
of time. And I've
It's
had students,
shocking to students how long it takes.
right, and I've certainly had, yeah, especially like 2D games, and I've had students certainly do things like in less time, but you know the art may not be as good or as polished in some cases,
Sure. I
or
mean,
maybe
if
like
I
missing that lighting pass, or like,
right,
we had one that looked like a triple A game this semester, but the students that came back who are now in industry to critique the student work, they were kind of laughing. They're like, hey, I use that asset pack, because
right,
they were
right,
doing like a UE5 game. And like
sure,
that's kind of the thing in UE5 games is you're
right.
gonna get this triple A look,
But it's not yours, right?
but it's
And
not yours.
everything
Yeah.
here has been built by students, like all of the sound, all of the visuals, all of the gameplay. They're not using, pre-coded things. They wrote it all from scratch.
And
For
I
better
just straight up
and
tell them, I
often
was like,
for worse, but
well, and I straight up tell them like, do not, um, I straight up tell them like, do not say like I'm an environment artist and I worked on this game, or like you can do that, but only show the assets in your portfolio that you did.
right.
Um, you have to be very careful. And so, because again, like there's that, we can get into there being lots of other problems though, where that starts to bleed into other games. Like I had some of my GB studio, like students in my game prototyping in their GB studio projects download assets, and I'm like, what are you doing? They're 16 pixel sprites. You can do that. You don't need to download
Right. Yeah, yeah,
assets.
yeah. Yeah.
um yeah, so
Um, yeah, let's see, what else was I going to say? Yeah, so our thought for what we would need to go to Steam is to have that the first chapter playable all the way through to beating the boss, and then to have the ability of the voice command module be activated and add in the things that you find going back. So you can either open the elevator and step in and get credits, or go back through the level and find all of the lore collectibles. To get a actual sense of what's going on, and having that first narrative unit complete as well as the first gameplay unit complete.
Mhm.
And then that would be the point when we'd be ready to start to put it on Steam and start entering it into local, festivals and stuff. Does
Yeah.
that seem reasonable to you?
Yeah, I think it sounds good. Um, I think that uh I mean I think this plays great. It's polished. I almost think it's like it comes across as farther along. I mean, stop me if you've heard this one. The game that you're making comes across as farther along than you think it is. Um,
Mm,
you know, because I look at it and again, like I was like, wow, this is like, again, it's better than some of the stuff I've certainly had put into Sam Arcade in the past. So I think that like uh
say what Sam Arcade is, because the students aren't going to know.
oh, Smithsonian American Art Museum Arcade, which is a festival I co-founded in Washington D.C. With like Smithsonian staff and some IGDA folks. But like I mean they're in year 9. Their theme this year is like sound and music because it's going along with like one of their other exhibitions. So I don't. Well, the submission. Well, they're not doing like a full judging thing anymore. They're kind of doing these like invite things or recommendation community things. But
Mm-hmm.
like I could certainly also like send them cool games at some point. But like that's one of the things that I think like they might want to keep an eye on, or like there's other places that I think you could show at that
Sure.
will be that sort of like Magfest Indies,
Magfest, Boston Fig, Connecticut
Boston Fig,
Fig,
yeah. Special
certainly. And then, yeah.
But yeah, Magfest is nice. Magfest is I Magfest is such a weird show in terms of they're having this like I don't want to phrase it like it's a bad thing. It's a good thing for the development of the show, but they're at like a I would say identity intersection where
Mm,
like I remember when they first did it, it was like there was some stuff that was like barely functional. Um,
right.
and I was working on a game that got rejected from it, so that tells you how that game worked. But the years and years later, like it was like, oh, this is pretty good. These are pretty good. And then like last year, Heart Machine was there, and
Mm,
it was like, oh, that's a jump in presence.
mm,
With the new Hyperlight Breaker game.
right.
So it's like, oh, that's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out if they're like known now. Because like there was a
Right.
period where Magfest, like Kotaku started showing up to Magfest, and I was like, man, I
Yeah,
remember
like
when this was, So sorry, I'm going down rabbit holes. The point being, yes, submit. I wonder how that's going to go because I
mm,
wonder where the show is as a show.
sure, sure.
Um, so
Yeah, I mean, I judged there for a bunch of years, so I know, I have contacts with those people too. Not that that would get me in, but
mhm. Well, and Travis, you know, he works with it
Mhm.
too.
Yeah, I think that's where I started, working there or doing the judging there. I didn't do it during COVID, but I was doing it prior to that. So,
Yeah.
all right. So this has been really helpful. I appreciate it a ton. The students are going to have to watch the recording of this and do an assignment on it, and may have questions. Um, I told them that they're not going to get responses during the semester, but I'll send those to you. And if you have time to answer them at some point in the future, we have an ongoing Discord for everybody who's worked on the project, and I can post those responses there. And I'd love to have you come back and see where it sits, like at the end of the fall semester in another 6 months of development.
Yeah, that
Um,
would be really incredible.
cool.
Sorry,
Awesome.
I'm
Thank
also
you so
trying
much
to
for your time.
sorry, I'm also trying to like get some of these other things uh uh worked out. I apologize.
Yeah, no worries. I have to take off about now anyway. So,
All
um,
right,
yeah,
cool.
thank you so much. I really appreciate your feedback and your kind words. It's nice to hear that it's not a complete embarrassment. So
No,
that's great.
I'd say it's the opposite. Like I opened it up and I was like, this is amazing. That's why I was like, please put it into festivals, because I think that like in the right festival it could really do some cool things.
Nice. Okay, well, thank you so much. And I'm going to stop the recording now. Maybe. Where is the recording? Stop recording.